I'm not too sure this is going to work. My husband got me one of these pistol grip things. Oh, God. I don't think I can hold my hand out long enough. My arms are not that long. The babies are out playing. So I was going to take this time to use this thing and see if I could do it. And I want to talk about that video that earned me so much wrath about almost 4 years ago. The video on the fermented feed fad. And, oh my goodness. First, y'all, let's just put it in perspective. It's chicken feed, it's not world peace. So, and I don't want to hear on this video how wonderful it is with your chickens and how you've had great success with it and blah, blah, blah. Because there's plenty of people out there singing the praises of this unconventional feed method. There's not too many of them going against the grain. The ones that do go against the grain are harassed and censored and canceled. We know how that is today. When you didn't call it that in 2017, but that's what it was. We're going to start by saying that avians have a crop-based digestive system, but it's just different. It's just plain different. They don't digest food like a mammal. They don't digest food like a cow. You know, they don't digest food like anything else. So there's a great margin for error here. And the yardstick for whether it's a good thing or not is not my chicken likes it. That's not a good yardstick for whether it's a good way to feed, whether it's a safe way to feed. It's just not. That's kind of like saying, well, I put my chickens out in the pasture overnight and they didn't get killed, so it's safe. That's exactly what it is. That's frankly nuts. It's just a matter of time. If you're doing an unsafe practice with your birds, it ain't going to turn out well. And I really can't believe how fervent the proponents of this are. It's seriously like a religion. It really is. Back in 2017, my best friend at the time belonged to chicken groups in Kentucky, and chicken swap meets that were in association with this group, and she knew a lot of people there, and I sort of knew them through her, kind of. And she said, I need to do a conference call with you and a young lady here that is having serious issues with her chickens. They are currently in the state of ill and dying, and she's very scared. Well, I said, well, okay, well, we'll do a conference call. So I got her on the line, and she said she had a bunch of birds that had bloated crops. Some had already died. She was trying to find what was going on, and she was nursing the ailing birds. She had one in her lap at the time we were talking, I do believe, and she was saying the only thing she'd done different was she began feeding fermented feed. And I said, well, first, take all that away from them immediately and don't give them any more of that. I told her what you would normally do for sauerkraut, and that's another issue right here, so we're not going to go into that. And she began treating the birds the way I said, and the ones that were really bad off went ahead and died, and she was able to help the others recover. Sauerkraut is a yeast infection. Like thrush, you know, it's a yeast infection. And after this happened and everything had leveled out, I've got a chick tapping on my shoe. Don't bite my skin, please. I've got shorty socks and bare legs here. She decided to send a couple of the birds to the University of Kentucky for necropsy. And after testing, it was decided that the issue that caused their deaths was caused by this fermented feed. This was a lab result. This was a lab diagnosis. Of course, if there was, and I told this on Backyard Chickens, and a woman who is very knowledgeable And she does a lot of the things that I guess I would call hippie stuff that I don't necessarily do with my chickens. But she's a very smart lady, and she sent me a private message, and she said, well, she doesn't even talk about it on the forum anymore because she gets trolled and lambasted. And she said if people are having trouble and the crowds get after them, she just private messages them and talks to them on, in the back room, so to speak, because these people are nasty. Well, she sent me an email, and I thought, I read that on my original video, and because I did a video and then a follow-up. I think this is in the follow-up, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have that anymore. I wonder if I even have her message. So I went back through my private messages, which is babies, and sure enough, I still had her messages from 2017. So I copied that because I couldn't remember everything she said. I wanted to read it to you again. And this is what her input was, okay? She said, when I used fermented feed, and she did do fermented feed, but this is a different type than they're talking about on the forums. She said, I lacto fermented. She said, which is way different than what's being taught on these forums. And I always offered dry feed too, free choice. In other words, she didn't make them eat that. She offered them something extra, that she didn't make them eat it. She said, all the studies that they quote to promote fermented feed were done with lacto fermentation, not yeast fermentation. She said, this stuff you see on the forums is putrid. It is a yeast fermentation that is not lacto fermentation by a long shot. It produces acetic acid, not lactic acid, and fermented to its very end, it turns into alcohol. True lacto fermentation is anaerobic and requires a completely closed fermentation container. Yeast fermentation is open to the air. So there are so many differences. I can't begin to cover them here in short. And these folks just don't understand. And if you try to educate them, they're ready for war. Oh, how I found that out. She said, I can hardly stand to hear the directions that are given and see photos of the horrible mess these chickens are being fed. So I quit looking at those threads. I just can't. When I fermented, which I haven't in a long time, if there was any trace of mold or even cam yeast, K-H-A-M, in the ferment, I tossed it. I consider that to be a failed lactoferment, which could be dangerous in excess. And here's a point she made that's a very good point. An excess isn't much when you're the size of a chicken. I've never tried to ferment a commercial pellet or crumble since I've never used one here, but I can tell you from observation that the, quote, fermented feed educators, unquote, typically tell folks to mix it up to the consistency of peanut butter, and they always tell folks not to have a water layer over the top. In fact, they make a joke of having the water over the top. And when they show their photos of nasty, disgusting, moldy feed and ask, is this mold? What should I do? They're told to just stir it in, that it's part of the ferment and it's good for them. Then the, quote, educator, unquote, of the moment post photos of their own yeast/mold-filled feed. And she goes on to, say that, of course, if you're feeding a yeast ferment, you can exacerbate or even cause sauerkraut. And if you're feeding a yeast ferment, you can just get a crop that's filling up with gas. That's what happened to this lady in Kentucky. She says, for example, have you ever eaten a yeast dough while it was rising, or sourdough bread dough before you bake it? If not, just let me tell you that the gas that yeast produces in your system is very uncomfortable, to say the least. So, what are y'all doing over there, you lunatics? What are y'all doing? What are you doing? I can't even tell if I'm pointing at over here. They're going nuts on this old roost thing. After this lady in Kentucky shared her experience on this forum she belonged to in the group to help other people to avoid their heartache like she had, all she got was grief. Everybody said she must have done something wrong, or that fermented feed could not have killed her birds. I mean, get that now. They said it could not have killed her birds. And now, I know she originally had said she didn't follow their instructions to the letter, but she hadn't really told me exactly what she did. So I asked my friend to ask her what it was exactly that she did. And she sent me an email, and this is what she had told me. She said, you were needing information on what I did when I fermented feed, which I'm positive caused so many issues in my flock. I used layer crumbles at first, then I switched to pellets. Both times I put it in a 5-gallon container and filled it with water until it covered the feed. I put a lid on it with small holes in it and let it sit, storing and checking. I had to write this down. I know I could remember this. Storing and checking every day until it was the way everyone had described it. It had bubbles and smelled fermented, in quotation marks. I'm not sure what that meant. Smelled like yeast, smelled yeasty. I'm not sure what she meant by that exactly. She said, my girls loved it, no doubt. But then came the problems with impacted crops and sour crops, which I had never had before. After losing a couple of hens and saving a couple, I quit the fermented feed as you and Lady Hawk advised. Lady Hawk's my friend. She's Cherokee. And since then, I hadn't had any crop issues. If I even see anyone asking about it, I tell my story and tell them I do not advise it. Hope this helps. So this poor woman would share her story. I'm watching these kids over here. What are they doing? I don't know if I can even see what they're doing over there. Playing around. So this poor woman would share her story and be attacked as if she was just lying. Interesting that she had never had any crop issues before the fermented feed or after she got those affected back to health and quit doing it. You know, that those instructions are what I've usually seen when I even dare to look at them. But you know, she got trolled all over the place when she tried to tell her story to help somebody else. So, one thing I want to say about this strange feeding method is that I've had birds die when they got a hold of feed at the bottom of the compost pile. I used to have a compost pile. It was burgeoning at the fence line. It was pushing against the fence at the bottom, and I didn't have it where the chickens couldn't get to it. And there would be feed in there, and a few of them, this is like 14 years ago, they ate around the bottom of it. You could tell they'd been eating a band around the bottom of it. And a few of the Orpingtons, the blue Orps were they had especially sensitive crops, like my Brahmas. And they actually, several developed sauerkraut, and I actually lost 2 Orp hens to that from eating that feed around the compost pile. So mold is crops are very sensitive to mold or anything close to mold. It just sits in there, it ferments, it causes gas and things. And if anything sits in the crop, they just get where they're malnourished, and you know, it's very, unless somebody does something about it, they will die. Also, this thing is very labor intensive. I mean, you can do it if you've got 6 to 10 hens, but you try to do it with 75 birds, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous way to feed. It is definitely a fad. In doing the research after all this happened, I actually came across an article or two that said that fermented foods for humans are actually not good, that they can destroy B vitamins. I don't know what they're doing over there. They destroy B vitamins. They don't produce them, they destroy them. Now, that's an interesting take. I've not seen a lot of information like that. And if you even dare to question these people, they run you out of town on a rail. But, once again, I don't advise fermented feed for chickens. Go away, fly. I don't advise fermented feed for any avian species. I think you're asking for trouble. And there's too much margin for error. Even if you do it the way this other lady said she used to do it, the lacto, not the yeast, and how careful she was, there's still room for error. And you know, even the person that thought she knew what she was doing doesn't do it anymore. It's not a natural way to feed. It's very labor intensive. I mean, you know, you can make gourmet meals for your chickens and put them on china plates, but that's not a natural way for a chicken to eat either. So I don't advocate that. I would never advocate that. In fact, I think it's a dangerous fad, a dangerous trend. I'm not sure how popular it is now, and I see a lot of YouTube channels talking about, fermented feed, the value of fermented feed. After what I saw and what I know, I'm not touching it. And remember, these chickens went through necropsies that confirmed the fermented feed caused this. Okay, this is not just hearsay. This had lab results to go with it. I used to actually have a copy of her lab results, but I mean, it's been a long time. It's been 4 years. I would not even know where to look at this point in time. So that's my take on it. So I will tell you, if the same thing happens that's happened the first time I put out this video, I'm going to delete your comment. I'm not taking it. I'm not taking the harassment. I'm not doing it. I want this information out there for people considering this feeding method, because all the gurus, the natural healing, they got to do everything naturally, which is kind of oxymoronic, since it's kind of silly, because this is not natural for an avian. They are advocating this, and a lot of the newbies don't know any better. like this poor lady who lost a lot of her poor flock. So there it is again. It's staying up, and I do not get on here and tell me I've been doing this for years and I don't have anybody dead and blah blah blah. I don't want to hear it. I've had this before. I don't want this to happen again. I want this information to stay up for people who need this information. And if I have too much harassment, I will cut off comments this time. I'm not taking it down this time. I'll just turn off the comments. So this is an educational channel, and I feel that I'm duty bound to get this information out because I don't hear anybody else saying this. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. What that means is there's a lot of pressure to go with the flow and go with what's new and new and great and popular. Well, new and great and popular ain't what chickens need. What they need is normal nutrition for the age and the function of the bird that they are. So there you go. My take on the fermented feed fad. And in all these years, I have definitely not changed my mind. So have a good day, everybody. Hope this helps somebody.